Welcome to a Community Partners interview, where we explore the organizations, opportunities, and resources that look to make change in our daily lives. I'm your host, Shane Odowd Rutherford, and you're listening to Voices for Ability Radio, all ability, all the time. Today, I'm joined by Robert Lattanzio, the Executive Director for Arch Disability Law Center. The Arch Disability Law Center is a specialty legal clinic that practices exclusively in the areas of disability rights law. Arch is dedicated to defending and advancing the equality, rights, entitlements, fundamental freedoms, and inclusion of persons with disabilities in Ontario. In order to carry out its mandate, Arch provides a range of legal services directly to persons with disabilities in Ontario, including the summary advice and referral service. Through this service, Arch provides basic legal information and summary legal advice on certain disability-related areas of law to persons with disabilities. Thank you for joining us today, Robert.
Well, thank you for having me. It's such a pleasure to be with you here today, Shane. Thanks so much.
To start, tell us a little bit about yourself and what drew you to disability rights law. What inspired you to dedicate your career to this work, and why did you want to support communities of people with disabilities?
Well, thanks for that question, Shane. Certainly, this area, as a lawyer, is incredibly challenging and fascinating area of law. But we're all drawn to this work for personal reasons, right? We all have reasons that drive us and that move us in particular directions. So I certainly have my backstory, and I had been working in the disability space for a while, and those experiences really shaped how I viewed the world around me. And in time, law school and practicing law in within this context, and in practicing disability rights advocacy seemed to be a way for me to try to address the types of experiences that I had gone through, and both within the sort of employment context that I was in, and some lived experience, and all of those all of those experiences led me down this path. And I had learned about Arch Disability Law Center, which is called something else at the time, but that became a way for me to really think about this as an actual way to practice law, that this was something that can actually be possible. And it was just exciting for me to learn about Arch and to learn about the legal clinic system in Ontario, because at the time I was living in Montreal and Quebec, and this just was an incredible opportunity, and I was really fortunate to to be able to article here as an articling student, and then continue my legal practice here. So incredibly fortunate to be practicing this area of law, and to be doing this work for our client communities.
So it sounds like you moved from a position where you encountered barriers, and now you're working towards removing those barriers for other people.
That's and that's how I think a lot of us who do this work, come to this work, where in one way or another, we experience things that shape our understanding of the world around us, and perhaps motivate us to maybe take a different direction and address.
Definitely. Arch offers a range of services. For our listeners who may be encountering Arch for the first time, can you walk us through some of your core services, like the specialty clinics, legal advice, some of the test case litigation, and law reform?
Absolutely. Thanks so much for that question, Shane. So we are, as you mentioned earlier, a specialty legal clinic, and we're part of this larger, incredible community of legal clinics across the province of Ontario. And so there are general service clinics effectively poverty law clinics all across Ontario. So for anyone living in Ontario who meets the eligibility criteria, can access legal services within poverty law at their community general service clinics. And then there are things called specialty legal clinics, and ARCH is one. And ARCH's specialty area is disability. We were incorporated in 1979, and since we opened our doors in 1980, we've been practicing exclusively in disability rights law. And the focus is really, as you mentioned earlier, to advance the rights of persons with disabilities. So as we do that as a community-based legal clinic, we have, or we try to use all the tools at our disposal. So we take a very holistic approach in trying to address legal issues that persons with disabilities are dealing with and are facing. And so what this means in terms of our service delivery is that we do provide some different services, and we try to again address issues that affect people across the province. So we are a provincial clinic. We're also a very small clinic, so we think about how we provide those services in a way that impact our communities across the province, and also dealing with the reality of the resources that we have. So to start, one of those services is the summary advice and referral service that you had mentioned. And that service, I would suggest, is incredibly important because it allows persons with disabilities to call us directly and email, or however they can communicate with us, and seek summary advice, legal information on particular areas of law that we practice in. And if we don't practice in those areas, we also will do our best to provide referrals to either private bar lawyers or other clinics or other legal organizations. And we will do our best to connect people to where they can get some help. So that is a way for people who may not even be sure if they have a legal issue, but need to talk to someone and explore that. We're here for that. We offer it. It's a free service. It's a completely confidential service, and we provide that to persons with disabilities regardless of financial eligibility. So our summary advice and referral service is the one service that is available to everyone with a disability across Ontario. And again, in the areas that we practice in, we may be able to provide additional services. In areas that we don't, we will do our best to refer people to where they can get that help. And so once someone goes through that initial process, that intake process, and if they do receive an appointment with a lawyer, if it's an area that we practice, and we provide some summary advice and referrals, there may be some additional services that we can provide, some additional legal services, and that will really depend on the nature of the issue and the nature of the legal area that's being raised. So we also, as you mentioned, practice in test case litigation. ARCH has always conducted test case litigation, and what that means is that we also are involved in cases that really challenge the law, challenge a particular provision in law, or challenge a particular practice of government that we are identifying a systemic legal issue, and we are taking forward a legal challenge in changing that, whatever that issue may be, and removing those barriers on a systemic level. We also identify and work on removing those barriers and addressing discrimination and addressing systemic issues through what we call law reform, and that is an area of law that, or a part of our practice that is really, again, through a holistic lens, is really trying to identify what those issues are. And as lawyers, we think about all the various ways that we can address. So sometimes it's about making submissions to government about why certain things need to be changed or why a bill needs to be amended, for example. And it's also about building capacity in community and providing legal education to community, to mobilize community on voicing concern around a particular issue or a particular reform of a bill or of a law, for example, in a bill that's being put to the legislature. So again, through a holistic lens, we think about the direct services that we provide to our client communities, but also the other ways that we try to change law and impact law, and how we work alongside our communities in trying to bring those voices forward. So the key mantra for us is nothing about us without us, and we really practice law in that way as well. We always make sure that we're working with our communities when we take positions or when we put together submissions. It's really critical in how we do our work.
Excellent. And to note, you will work with individuals, but you also work with organizations, and it seems rather expansive. You also provide legal education to individuals, and with your test cases, I recall there was a national one. Considering the age of Arch, almost 50 years now, well before any legislation came in under human rights law, you had a case about national transportation issues for people with disabilities.
Well, that's right, and certainly the areas that Arch has practiced are quite expansive. So to your point and to your question, when Arch first opened its doors, disability, for example, was not a protected ground in the Ontario Human Rights Code, which is which almost feels it wasn't that long ago, right? And so actually one of the first things that Arch did do was act as legal counsel to a coalition um, that ultimately was successful in bringing disability or at that time handicap into the code, codifying it as a protected ground, um, uh, protecting our communities from discrimination on the ground of disability. So the landscape, in that regard, has changed, and some of the early cases as well involved the right to vote, for example, um, issues around guardianship, and so truly fundamental issues that our communities were facing. For example, the right to be in school. Around that time, when Arch opened its doors, again, there was a transition where students with disabilities, didn't have a right to public education, and so that was, that was changing through an amendment in the Education Act, and Arch brought a case on behalf of Emily Eaton, which was a case that ended up all the way to the Supreme Court of Canada, which was really the first case that raised Section 15 argument of the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms within a disability context. So there were a lot of different areas of law that Arch was engaging in bringing forward these issues.
Section 15 is what again?
That would be the equality provision of the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms.
Okay, excellent. I'm also seeing that self-advocacy is how people can be empowered. You have self-advocacy training initiatives and a respecting rights program. Can you explain who these programs serve and what they teach?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for that question, because that work I believe to be so fundamental to ultimately the work that we do here at Arch, and that the work that clinics do generally across the province really is about capacity building within our communities. So respecting rights is a great example of that. It was a program that began over 10 years ago, and it focuses on one particular disability community. And I should say that Arch does practice from a cross disability lens and an intersectional lens, but we aren't focused on one particular disability. But Respecting Rights is a program that is designed and focused on building capacity to engage in rights discourse within the intellectual disability and developmental disability community. And it was a program that came out of amendments that had occurred in the developmental services sector. And members of that community had raised concerns about how their rights were not being recognized, through all those changes in the system at the time, and that we really need to think about a way to make rights education accessible for this particular community. And so, Respecting Rights is essentially a group of advocates who identify and who are labeled with intellectual disabilities, and essentially do one of two things. There's peer mentoring that happens through that group, and there are sessions that are delivered about rights generally, and about rights within that service delivery model. And that type of education is done in really creative ways. So it's done in different ways. There's a very heavy arts-based component to that rights education.
Yeah, elaborate on that, because I think it's completely novel in how the messages are communicated.
Well, and it really is back to really thinking about how our communities engage and learn, right? And so there are these concepts that can be so heavily weighted with jargon and with technical elements to it that make it so inaccessible for our communities. And so we are, I think our goal here, we really are trying to make law accessible, right? And we want our communities to engage in that discourse in a way that that they feel they are really truly informed and have a very solid understanding. And so for us to do that is really understanding what the needs are of our communities. And so with this community, we really wanted to make sure that we created this program directly with the community. And so it was really led by our members. And our members identified that, some of these concepts, like, for example, the differences in the type of rights. When we talk about rights, we talk about it sometimes in a very loose way, but there are very different types of rights that flow from different spaces, right? And so that can be a very difficult concept to convey. And so we have different activities and different exercises that start to chip away at that. And that could be, different arts-based type of projects that take an idea and members, begin to engage together in creating through art some expressions of that. It could also be through a role playing. There's a lot of role playing as well that happens, and trying to break down, how how these rights actually work in real life, right? And what are the sort of consequences.
That's important, because law in and of itself is often intimidating, and people perceive that it's inaccessible. But if it's broken down and delivered in a way that people can engage with it and understand it that way, it really is a very effective tool to educate and to demystify law and rights.
I fully agree with that. Exactly. I fully agree. And we feel that's part of our mandate. That's part of our role here, is to convey whether it's within the context of respecting rights, or whether it's a particular case that we're working on, and can convey what it means and what impacts it can have, and ultimately what it means for our community. How it changes their lives, or what they need to know about it. So that is a really important element of what we do, and it as you said. I mean, it's so fundamental, and it's also can appear to be very different depending on the communities that we're working.
Definitely. Arch also produces blogs and fact sheets and educational resources. Can you tell our listeners what kind of content goes into those and how they support people with disabilities in understanding their rights?
Mhm. Yeah, thank you, Shane. We create materials mostly on the areas of on the areas of law that we practice. So there are going to be a lot of areas of law that we don't have materials on, and there is a wonderful resource here in Ontario called Clio, which is also part of the community legal clinic community that has a lot of amazing materials on their website. So in terms of our materials, we have a series of what we call fact sheets, which is really a very um, uh, quick, sort of breakdown of like the main elements, and we do our best to make it in very clear language. We also have, I should say, a lot of our materials also has accompanying plain language versions of it, other alternate formats. But generally, we have some fact sheets that give a sort of snapshot of a particular area of law or a particular issue, and then we have a number of more detailed type of handbooks and toolkits on particular issues, and we also have quite a bit of material on our website, which I should say we will be launching a new website quite soon. And we also have a digital catalog that one can access through our website that has a very, I think, comprehensive database or catalog on materials, submissions, books, and so on. And some of that is available. It's all through our website, and some of those are scanned and available through that database. And we also have a physical resource center here in Toronto at our offices as well for people who wish to access the materials that are not available digitally. And we also have increasingly a number of videos on again areas of law that we practice. So we try to provide information in different ways. We also have a newsletter called the Arch Alert that provides again a bit of a snapshot on issues that are important to our communities, and we do that again in clear language, and we try to really highlight some key things that we think our communities would want to know.
And for the listeners, Clio is Community Legal Education Ontario.
Oh, that's correct. Yes. Thank you. Thank
And
you.
they also have resources as well. I'm looking here, some things like the Inclusive Education Initiative. That's a webinar series, and there's a lot of information here. And you do presentations to community groups and organizations. So if there's a specific group that wants to have a education about legal concerns for them, that's something Arch can produce as well.
We welcome if organizations wish to connect with us and discuss whether they would like to put on a presentation or a webinar. We certainly welcome that, and we can explore whether that is something that we can do depending on what the needs are of the organization. We certainly welcome that. We have on our website, there's information about how to do that.
Thank you. And it's also encouraging that you also work with members of the legal community to educate them as to accessibility for, I suppose, for advocating for their clients as well.
That's correct. We do that in a number of different ways. We have a service that offers an opportunity for lawyers that are representing people with disabilities, and they can call us and we can discuss with them particular issues that are disability related. We and the reason why we do that is that if someone does have a lawyer, we wouldn't be able to speak with that individual. But we've offered this service so that we're still able to support that individual. So, for example, if a lawyer is developing an argument that's specific around disability rights, or has a question about capacity, for example, to instruct, these are things that we can speak to a lawyer about in supporting their client. We also have some material that we do. We write articles and so on that we hope is helpful to the legal community, and we work with committees and associations and groups as well in terms of, again, bringing that voice, bringing the disability rights voice within the legal community. Another way, I guess there are a number of different ways that we do this, but one comes to mind, quite topical, because last week we co-hosted an annual event that we hold with the Law Society of Ontario, and we usually hold it during the National Access Ability Week that happened in late May, early June, and this year we held it on December 3rd in celebration of the International Day of Persons with Disabilities, and that's a way for us every year to partner with the Law Society in bringing together both the legal community in Ontario and our communities, disability communities, and to create that space to discuss issues around access to justice and around accessibility within the legal profession, and really engage in those issues with both our communities, our partners, and lawyers and the Law Society. So that's a good example of how there is certainly interest. There is a need. We would all agree to keep on having this discourse and to keep on thinking about how we can make our profession and how we can make legal services more accessible to our communities. So that event is one example of how we try to address that.
That event was called Ways Forward for Disability Rights in Canada, Community Involvement in the United Nations Review Process. I believe there's a recording of that coming out shortly. Robert, can you explain what this event focused on and why international human rights mechanisms like the UN and CRPD matter, and how community participation strengthens advocacy at home?
Absolutely. And thank you for that. I just want to add that every year we think about a different theme. So every year we have a different theme when we co-host this event, and they have been recorded for the last little while. So I think the last 6 or 7 are available on the Law Society website, and on ours as well. We have a link. So if anyone is interested to go back, there are other themes that are explored through this event. This one in particular, so this one was a real focus on the work that our communities did throughout really quite a long stretch around reporting, the reporting cycle that occurs through the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. So this is a convention that Canada has ratified, And what the convention does is that it basically it's a treaty that Canada now has agreed to in how it is to essentially realize the rights of persons with disabilities. So, in many ways, the convention doesn't really create new rights, but it interprets established international human rights in ways that are meaningful and relevant within the disability context. So, amongst the obligations that Canada has is to be part of a review of its implementation. And so, in a nutshell, to keep this um, uh, simple enough here or quick enough, there is a committee that was created uh, by the convention. It's the Committee on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, and it's a United Nations committee that essentially enters into a dialogue with the country, with the state party that has ratified the convention. And this process happens in this case because of the pandemic. They were conducting the second and third review jointly together, and essentially Canada made a report to the UN about how it has been implementing the convention, and civil society, so organizations, had a role in this where they are able to also provide their response to the questions and their reaction to the report to the UN directly. And so we had done that. So we were a co-coordinator in bringing together 53 disability rights groups and civil society groups together in pulling together what is called essentially a parallel report or a shadow report, which is a report that is again in response to the questions that the UN puts forward and the report that Canada puts forward to the UN. And that report was submitted in January, and then a smaller delegation went to Geneva, the civil society delegation, as well as, of course, the Canadian delegation. And there was what we call a dialogue at the United Nations in Geneva that essentially was the panel of this committee directly asking questions to government. And a lot of it, based on what communities were telling them through this process, through the parallel report, and so on.
Well, this is important in that we have an international standard that we have agreed to achieve, and we are then doing an internal review. But that, with the shadow report, um, it's helpful because a government may believe they are on the right track, whereas the delivery of their programs and services or supporting legislation, in practice, isn't actually connecting with the broader communities. And then it it provides a juxtaposition as to what we think we're achieving and what we may not be achieving, and how do we relate to our peers internationally.
Mhm.
What kind of
Yeah,
holds our feet to the fire as to meeting our commitments and obligations.
exactly. And that's, again, a really good way to frame it because it really underscores why it's important for communities to engage in this process. It's critical that the momentum that we gained, I think, over the years. And just to put it in perspective, we had said this at the session. The first review that occurred, we were as a civil society group in putting together a parallel report. There were 17 organizations, and this time around there were 53, and it was an incredible opportunity to learn from all of these groups who some are right at the grassroots level, and some groups are working on these issues or certain issues on the systemic level, at the macro level, and creating spaces for uh, all of that collaboration. working towards an objective that not everyone has to agree on everything, but having opportunities to build those relationships and build capacity in that way has really proven to be critical. And so the event really was about the ultimately the outcome of all of that, which is what we call concluding observations, and that's essentially recommendations that the UN committee ultimately releases. And I think when we review those concluding observations, we realize that the importance really can't be overstated, because it really needs to come from communities. Because as you said, Shane, some of the information, may be disconnected to the real life, experiences and the realities that that people with disabilities are facing right on the ground, and that doesn't necessarily come through as government assesses, the impacts of the various programs or legislative amendments that they've made. So it is incredibly important for organizations to come together and really understand, how we can convey, the ongoing barriers and the ongoing socioeconomic deprivations that our communities are experiencing, in a way that again, holds their feet to the fire, right? To really get to a point where we're trying to identify, the areas here that government has to commit to in order to achieve the rights that are contemplated in the convention.
Well, certainly, community participation strengthens advocacy back at home. And importantly, I think we need to highlight is that persons with disabilities are at the table at the United Nations, and our voices are being heard.
Absolutely.
Okay, so before we wrap up, what is the one thing you want everyone to know about Arch and the work that you do?
Well, I would say that if you are in Ontario and you're a person with a disability and you have a legal issue, um, and you don't know where to turn, please contact us. And if we cannot help you, we will do our best to provide the resources and connect you to resources we can. And that we may have yet a lot of work to do, but we firmly believe that together um, we can continue to achieve some gains.
Robert, thank you so much for joining us and for the incredible work you do with Arch. For our listeners, check out archdisabilitylaw.ca for resources, events, and legal support. I'm Shane Odowd Rutherford, and this has been Community Partners on Voices for Ability Radio. All ability, all the time.